Welcome to the Art of Quantum Healing, where we speak about trauma, mental health and healing. I am your host, Lisa Nadler, and I'm thrilled to have you come into my energetic field. In this podcast, I will be sharing my own personal experiences to guide, teach, and help pave the way. We'll also be welcoming so many other divine souls who have overcome trauma and found happiness, health, wealth, and next level abundance through mind, body, and soul connection. My mission is to help women high vibe and thrive with inner peace, passion, and purpose. Welcome to the Art of Quantum Healing. Today I have another beautiful guest and really good friend, actually, not just a guest this one, called Hannah Joy. And we're going to be going really, really deep on mental health. And also she's going to be doing some juiciness around navigating spiritual connection. Oh, I'm so excited. Hello, Hannah, and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So good to have you here, gorgeous. Phoning in from the beautiful New Zealand.
Yes.
My home country. So I'm just going to read to you a little bit about Hannah. Hannah is a spiritual conduct and an intuitive healing coach, passionate about sparkling joy out of the darkest places and supporting spiritual and personal transformation and activations. She is a dream weaver, and we're definitely going to be getting into that because I've had some of your sessions. They're freaking powerful. She is a dream weaver who uses the power of the subconscious mind and astral realms to empower her clients to transform their realities. Her journey of trauma and awakening has inspired her to do the work she does, and she's missed out on here. She's also written a book, which is also amazing. And it's just become an ebook. Welcome, gorgeous. Yay. So first of all, what I love for you to do is just to share a little bit about you, just so that the people that are listening can actually really connect and understand the depths of where you've come through and what you've done to move through to where you are, because you've got a beautiful story.
Sure. Where do I begin? Right, go into channel mode. Yeah, I guess it all started, well, from my infancy, really. My mother said that I used to just jibber jabber to people in the back of the car, and I'd always be pointing to things that weren't there. And we drove past a cemetery, I think it was, when I was about 4, and I said, "Oh, look at all the people," and there was no one there. And then as I got to about 12, 13, those gifts really started ramping up, and I was having visitations from spirit. I was channeling things like languages that I hadn't heard before, like light language, light codes, that kind of thing. But then I found, as much as that started channeling through, it was almost like my human body was in a little bit of like dissonance between having all of that come through and being in a physical human experience.
Yeah, the mind,
so I started
body. Yeah.
So I started having a lot of contrast between the joys, like the highs and the lows, and being able to navigate and feel into different energy. Mm-hmm. And I'd go into certain environments, like especially high school. That particular environment became more and more and more challenging for me, and I'd go into these massive like highs and then deep lows. Yeah. And I think when I was about 15, I started finding it so difficult to go to school that I had a guidance counselor who said, "Oh, you've got murky brain." And that was kind of like my first experience of anything close to a diagnosis. Yeah, foggy brain, murky brain. And she said, "Yeah, this is what I've been experiencing in my adulthood, but you're really lucky that you're having it now, because it's going to like support you further down the track with, you know, how to navigate these emotions and this kind of thing." And then I moved to the South Island of New Zealand, Christchurch, when I was 17 to go to university. Yeah. And I started having some really massive spiritual awakening experiences, like experiencing the feeling of like angel wings, seeing like guides in a much more like powerful way than I ever had before. And I found that different geographical places that you can go to can create different activations. Portals. Yes. And I was really excited by it, but I shared it with maybe not the wrong people, because it, you know, it catapulted my journey. Mm-hmm. But I shared it with my partner at the time, and I got taken to an emergency psychiatric appointment and then admitted into hospital for 5 days.
How old?
17.
Can I just reverse for a little bit? When you were in the car with your mum and you were saying that you were seeing things, or whenever you were around, you were seeing, was there any judgment, or was there any don't be silly, or was she quite open to it?
She was really open to it.
Okay, so that's why it happened at 17. You shared it because you didn't think anything of it.
She kept me as far away from doctors as she possibly could my whole upbringing. She was always really anti me going to the doctor. And I remember thinking when I was about 12, 13, like, why won't mum, like, why is she always really hesitant about me going to see the doctor? Like, does she not want me to do well, you know? And then upon reflection, I'm like, yeah, she knew that I was gifted.
Yeah. Well, she would have been the same, wouldn't she? She would have had the same sort of gifts.
She does, but hers were quite suppressed because of her own upbringing. So I had this experience in the hospital, and they diagnosed me with bipolar type 2 disorder. But this particular experience was a little bit different because I've had 2 hospital experiences. And this first one, I describe it as being quite magical. Like, they said to me, look, you are gifted, you are having these experiences, but you need to find a way to navigate them and kind of be in your human experience.
So they acknowledged it. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
But they still diagnosed you with bipolar.
Yes.
I suppose they had to write something down, didn't they?
You know, like, naturally they said things like, you know, avoid alcohol, avoid caffeine. These are things that are just going to elevate you and bring you like more into that channeled kind of stance.
Yeah.
I was really fortunate that at that time they didn't force any medication on me or tell me that I had to be medicated. And so it wasn't until maybe 4 or 5 years later that I went into that journey of being medicated and seeing different doctors who were kind of a bit more, I guess, scientific in their approach.
Yeah.
And having that contrast. Yeah. And then I guess navigating the spiritual awakening has been a big part of that journey, and navigating being in my gifts. And, you know, it was only a couple of years after that. Actually, it was the year after I first got diagnosed, I ended up going to Egypt. Had a massive past life spiritual awakening there.
Geez, what a place to go to.
Sorry?
What a place to go to. That place is really like, charged. Wow. Yeah. And what year were you? 18 then?
I was 19.
19.
Yeah, 19. So I think it was 18 months after my diagnosis.
Right.
I just turned 19. And that was a huge experience in terms of like spiritual activation again.
Where did that happen? Were you in one of the tombs, or were you in one of the tunnel, or where was that?
I remember there was a flight from Cairo down to the south of Egypt in Aswan. And the only way I can describe it is that I feel like I went through, I'm going to be quite woo-woo with my language.
Go for it, babe. You're in the right place.
I feel like I went through like a time lapse.
Yeah.
Like it was like a quantum jump where I feel like I almost went back in time. Like I remember going through the airport when we got to Aswan, and there was like no one there, and it was all white.
Wow.
And it was almost like I'd kind of traveled through into some kind of almost like past life quantum healing experience. Like I don't know how else to describe it.
And it's at the age of 19, that would be like, what the hell?
It was almost like, and you'll probably be able to speak to this or know a bit about this, like when we drop into our channel, it's like our soul knows what to do, and it just starts driving. It's like, oh, okay, this is me back in my higher consciousness self, and it just does.
Like when you astral travel, same thing. You just off you go. Yeah.
It's not until afterwards that you go, oh my gosh, I've just spent the last like 2 weeks in Egypt channeling hieroglyphs and doing all this light language at the top of hotels, and like, yeah, you kind of come back into your human experience and go, whoa, that was a trip.
Who needs drugs?
Yeah. But I think one of the things I want to speak to is that with these experiences, it can feel quite normal to you or can feel quite empowering for you, but the people around you often don't understand.
No.
And I know that on that particular holiday, I was with my father, and he was just like, what's going on with my daughter? What's happening? And he found it really, really difficult, and it caused quite a disruption in our relationship.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
If somebody doesn't understand, like if we'd had this conversation 5 to 8 years ago, I would have been looking at you like sideways thinking, what is she talking about? What is she talking about? When you start opening up your consciousness, things start making, and you open yourself up to the possibility that there is a whole other realms and everything out there, dimensions, etc., then you start to really have been able to look at these things. But when you're not, and you don't understand it, and you're not the same field, you're not in the same environment or anything, it's very hard to understand when someone's sitting there going, oh yeah, and I time warped and I did this and I did this. You're like, okay. And it's different language too. Like you can say something and people be like, I don't, like, it's funny. Okay, so let's just say I had the real estate here before, and she was like, I just sold a house to this lady, and she bought a new house, and she started talking to me about these, she was going through portals with her new house, and I was like, okay, all right then. So she said it sounded really cool, but I had no idea what she was talking about. And I think that's where people are, and you've got to be open, you've got to be absolutely open. And that's when you can start to open, you can start to actually see different things, and you start a whole new healing journey. So that would have been huge. Your dad would have been like, and how's your dad now?
After that experience, we had a falling out on that holiday because he was just finding it too difficult. And we didn't talk for about 2 years afterwards.
Wow.
And then how many years is it now? 2.5 years ago, I was hospitalized again. Mm-hmm. And a lot of blame was thrown at my father. And I think also seeing me in that position where he's had his own journey with mental health was just too difficult for him. And so, yeah, at the moment, we don't have a relationship.
Yeah.
So it's been a difficult journey for me in terms of the way that my gifts like impact other people, and my mental health journey and how that's impacted other people, like close people in my life as well.
It'll be something that's quite hard to navigate through, and especially with the people that you love, because the people you love is where you want your sense of security. It's the people that you love it's one-on-one, is providing and having that security is what you need. And it's hard when you don't have people to lean on, especially the ones that actually should be there for you. But it's interesting, and when I feel into it, Hannah, I think you probably would have triggered the hell out of him with his own mental journey. And we're all on our own journey, and if he's ready to receive and to heal, then he will do so. But yeah, hopefully that comes right, hun. So when was the second time that you ended up in hospital?
So I was, so it was 2.5 years ago. So it was June of 2019.
Yeah.
And in the weeks leading up to that, there'd been quite a few things that had happened for me. I was full-time in my spiritually based business. I was doing a lot of channeling. To be honest, not a lot of grounding afterwards, not a lot of clearing my energy.
Yeah.
I had an astral ayahuasca experience that I wasn't actually aware that I was going to be having when I had it. So, and nothing against this person, I won't say who it was, but I had a session with someone where they gave me the heart of ayahuasca in the session, and it was like an astral hypnotherapy journey. And for the 5 days after that, I was just completely out of my body, and it felt like how people describe their experiences with ayahuasca, like I had actually
for 5 days.
For 5 days. And then it was, I think, 2 days after that I ended up hospitalized. So I spent the weekend with a very good grounded friend of mine who just could not ground me. Wow. She's a spiritual practitioner herself.
Yeah.
And then she rang my father, who came to get me, and he couldn't ground me either. And I remember being on the motorway coming into Wellington and trying to get out of his car because I was having all these like visualizations. And
yeah, when you're on ayahuasca, you're not in your body. Yeah, wow. Yeah.
And then he took me to a very good friend of mine whose flatmate had bipolar. And so she had a bit of experience of dealing with it in a practical sense.
Mm-hmm.
And she witnessed me for a couple of hours with her sister there. And that was when they made the decision to call the ambulance.
Right.
The ambulance came and said, oh, she'll be all right. She just needs to have a sleep. And then they rang the police. And then that was when the crisis team came and sat with me. And at this point, all of the timelines were collapsing. And one thing I can remember is like channeling this energy of like Mother Mary and like holding this like baby Jesus and like channeling all of this like stuff around that narrative. And they were like, yeah, she's not able to tell the difference between like past, present.
And you couldn't get out of it. You were still in it.
Yeah, I was very much still in it.
So when you left from having that session with that lady, did she not realize that you weren't back in your body?
No. Yeah.
Wow. Ooh.
And there were a couple of other things that had been brought to light over that time. Like I was studying trauma and addiction therapy at university and learning about the Te Reo Waitangi and like a lot of the, ancestral and traumas of the, Indigenous people of New Zealand. Like there was a lot of energy that I was working with at that time. And I think I just overdosed on energy, really.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you can do that, can't you? You can get to, and you said it beautifully, like, and we're going to talk a little about navigating your spiritual connection. You have to ground, you have to clear, you have to bring yourself into the clear channel. Otherwise, it's really hard to navigate through everything, especially when you were so open. I mean, holy shit. And then chuck on this and this and this and this and this. Sometimes the best thing we can do is do nothing. And when I did that 2 weeks, when I did that Norai, the plant medicine for 2 weeks. I'm in a beautiful controlled area, and I was basically just staring at the ceiling. It was the best 2 weeks of my life. I didn't know how I was going to do it because I've got, I'm like ADHD. I'm like, go, go, go. But it was the best thing I did. It was the most grounding in my body experience. And I came out a completely different person. I really did. Whereas when I did ayahuasca, it brought up a lot of emotions. It brought up a lot of things that and the things that you see. So being in the two different first, being with ayahuasca for 5 days, good God, woman. No wonder. So when did you finally feel yourself coming out of it? How long were you in hospital for?
I was in hospital for 5 weeks. I was under the Mental Health Act, so I actually couldn't leave until a judge deemed me fit to go. I'd say, a lot of the first couple of weeks of being in hospital are a bit of a blur.
Yeah, they would be.
I'd say maybe about the 2-week mark, but they gave me this medication called palperidone. And basically they said, look, and I read up about it and I read all the side effects and they were awful. And I said, look, I don't want to take this. And then I remember the nurse saying to me, if you don't take this, it's very unlikely that you will get released in the time frame that you would like to get released in. And so it was basically like, you either take this or you're kind of going to be stuck here for a while.
Yeah.
And it's essentially 3 months worth of medication in one go. And it was that kind of took me from this energy, but instead of taking me down to here and being normalized, it flipped me right down the other side.
That's for somebody who is spiritually connected, for somebody who is a clear channel, like even half a sleeping tablet is like you could sleep for a week sort of thing. It causes huge imbalance in your body because you're such a clear channel. Holy moly. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then you were all the way down.
Yeah.
How long till you got out of that?
8 months.
8 months. And mentally, when you were going through this, because we're going to talk a bit, we talk about your mental journey, and now you're helping people with mental health, which is just freaking like, wow, really like needed at the moment, especially. When did you decide that you really wanted to go deeper on the mental health rather than, I know you still do the spiritual side of your work, but that the mental health was exactly where you wanted to go? Was there a reason that you decided that from after your experience, or was it just a natural progression into it?
I actually started channeling it before my experience. When I had a client that I was working with who said that she was going to take her own life.
Mm.
And I just remember thinking there has to be an ethical consideration and accountability around this work.
Mhm.
I have to go and equip myself. And I have to also recognize my own journey with those kinds of like dark thoughts and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'd started channeling from spirit that my work was going to be about mental health and spirituality beforehand. And it's almost like I've said to people, it's almost like they said, oh, you think you're going to go and study? We're actually going to throw you into the best. We're going to throw you like right into the actual.
They have such a sense of humor, don't they? But the thing is, they always know that you're never given more than you can handle. So you could handle it. You're a strong woman. It's like, okay, let's really give you a taste for it.
Like, what better way to understand the broken system and the way that it's not serving people than to actually go and be in it for 5 weeks and have an experience of it firsthand.
Absolutely. So you're going to bring your holistic and your spiritual aspects into the mental health.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's my intention.
Yes.
That's my intention.
Awesome.
It's a big mission, and there are days where, like, I work in healthcare, and there are days where I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm biting off more than I can chew. But there's so much about like community and tribe that is starting to come together with this spiritual work that we're not meant to be like siloed in our work. And that's why things like co-creation are so important as well.
So important. I love that. Awesome.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about the navigating through your spiritual connection.
Yeah.
So when you started really like delving more and more into it, and let's just have a side, let's talk about the dream aspect. Like, how did you, because this just fascinates me, and for those that are listening, I have had 2 or 3 individual blocks of sessions with Hannah. Like when I have dreams that I'm like, oh good goodness, and I keep having the same dream or whatever, I'm like, what the hell, I've got no idea what's going on. And I would always message Hannah, and she then would get in there and she'd do her magic and blah blah blah. So and I'll let her explain that. But just how did you know that you could actually read and understand dreams? How did that all happen?
I think it started when I was a little girl, and mum was quite hot on dreams herself. And she taught me to read and write when I was 4. And I remember we used to sit and we would journal them. And whenever I would have a scary dream or a dream that like upset me, she would do this exercise with me and get me to rewrite the dream, and we'd do like a little visualization. And so it kind of started there. And then I noticed that if I journaled them, I tended to have quite prophetic dreams.
Afterwards.
Yeah, like there was a dream in particular, and I've looked at the date because it's in my journal, and I've got all my old journals up at our family farm.
Oh my God, you're a good girl.
And it was about 2 months prior to 9/11. Wow. I had this dream about being on an airplane, and all these people were screaming and the plane was going down, and it's like I go into this massive descriptive thing, and I've looked at the date, and I remember every time I go back to it, I'm just like, oh my God. And I've had another prophetic dream recently that came to light the other day, where I kind of predicted like what's going on in New Zealand with the whole like government situation and all this kind of thing. Like I have had quite a few like brought in dreams where things end up happening.
Wow.
But I always knew, or I've known since I've really stepped into my spiritual work over the last, like, I'd say 5 years, that working with the astral realm and working with like the quantum kind of journey in that sense, we can actually start to co-create our reality and turn our reality into a manifestation of something if we work with that energy. Like it's like that's how we go home. We connect with spirit, and then they download things for us, but we can actually send stuff back up, if that makes sense. Like
it does.
By co-creating with like the message that we get and going, oh, actually, I don't like that. I'm just going to send you the second draft, and we'll just
I've got a friend that, and when she said to me, she goes, I actually prefer my dream life. And I'm like, what do you mean you prefer your dream life? She goes, I live two lives. I live one in my dream where I actually live in it. And I'm like, how do you live in your dreams? Like, she goes, yeah, and I rewrite them and I navigate them and I prefer it than my real one. I'm like, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're talking about. So you actually get in there and you're like, no, I don't like that. Can you do that for me? Can you get into one of my dreams and rewrite a few things? That'd be bloody great.
Well, what I've started doing lately with my clients is I channel their energy, channel a dream for them, and then I'll also work with whatever dream's coming through for them. And then I kind of call it like a quantum healing session where we'll go. Sorry?
When they're sleeping?
No, when they're awake.
When they're awake, okay.
Where we'll go into the dream and I'll get them to kind of co-create with me and speak to me as we're going through it, where we'll rewrite it and then kind of program their mind to start, changing and editing how their brain's working, because it's working with the subconscious as well.
Oh, that subconscious mind is a powerful little sucker.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a whole new navigating. That's a whole new navigating. I mean, when you did my dream reading and you tapped into it and you were like, oh, your mother this and your father this and da-da-da, and I'm like, holy shit balls. And then that, and then you saw me doing that TED talk and then that, and you saw me what I was wearing. And I'm like, oh, that sounds nice. We'll keep that dream. We like that one.
Yeah.
But it's really good because sometimes when you have, like, when I was having that freaky dream, it's nice to know that, see the aspect of what, for you to actually help the person understand what there actually is happening in their mind when they're in that dream state. Because sometimes you think you have a dream, and especially at the moment with the energies, you're like, what the hell was that? And then you keep having it and having someone to be able to, because you actually came into my dreams when I was sleeping, right? I gave permission. You came into my dreams for 2 or 3 nights. You read the dreams that I were having, and then you voice messaged to me what it was. And it was incredible. It was so incredible. It was so beautiful. So it's a big gift, that it really is.
Yeah. And it's fun. It's playful and it's fun. And it's really cool, especially when people are struggling with like not remembering their dreams as well. I've been working with a couple of people over the last week where we've been able to actually, they're messaging me like, oh my God, I had a dream. Like, I remember,
so you just activated something that brought it back. Because some people actually stop their dreams, don't they? They actually, no, I don't want to, I never dream.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's often people who have had like suppressed memories or bad experiences with that space as well. And so it's kind of like it just shuts down. There's like a trust factor there.
Yeah. So when you on that trust factor and shutting down, I remember when you came out of hospital the last time, I remember you decided to shut everything down.
Yeah.
So how long did you do that for? You just didn't want to connect. You were just like, no, I cannot go into those realms. You were really scared, would be the good word to say it. Yeah. Because it was such a profound experience, wasn't it? I mean, 5 days on ayahuasca, holy shit.
Also because in the first like week of being in hospital, you're constantly being programmed with this, like, this isn't normal, it's not natural, it's da 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 da. And so I'd gotten to this point where I was like, oh, it's not natural for me to have these like experiences and da da da. So I guess I've kind of gotten programmed to see a lot of fear in that community, in that space.
Yeah.
But I'd say probably around 7 or 8 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And it took a long time for the medication to integrate into my body. Like, a lot of people ask me, oh, does medication stop you from being in your spiritual gifts? And I'd say, like, usually for the first 6 months while your body is acclimatizing to that, then yes. And then after that, I started to be able to channel again and connect with spirit. So,
How often do you like navigate with your spirit team? Like, I mean, do you do it daily? Do you tell us about your actual spirit, how you actually communicate and connect and all that juiciness?
Every day.
Every day. Yeah.
So I've gotten really good at my daily practice now, where I get up and I meditate and I journal my dreams. And then throughout the day, I'm always like babbling with them and getting signs and
babbling with them.
And, I'm at work with all my crystals and
who isn't? Is there anybody who isn't?
Listening to that spiritual podcast so that I can just,
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I have my little evening practice of preparing for my dream space and meditating. It's my what's my word? My non-negotiable, my absolute non-negotiable.
So you find that if you don't, then you don't, it's almost like the brain can become fuzzy. I know for me, if I don't meditate after 3 days, if I haven't meditated for more than 2-3 days, I get titchy, I get irritable, because I had a lot of anxiety. That was my thing. So my mind, I'm such an active person in my mind that I know that I need to ground myself and bring myself back to balance. So I know that when I'm not doing something, that's the effect I have. So if you don't do it, does anything happen, or you just...
I'd say I'm the same as you. I get irritable, I get restless, I get anxious. I start to notice like physical symptoms as well. Like I'll get more, like my appetite will change, those kinds of things, or I'll get like even like skin irritations.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about your book that you wrote when you came out of hospital.
Yeah. Sorry?
What's it called? I should have that. You didn't put it on your thing. I was like, where's the book?
How to Find Your Joy and Purpose.
Yes.
So I co-wrote it with my mum.
Yeah.
And it was when I was in the depths of my depression, leaving hospital. And she said, I think the way that you've always been able to overcome things is through your writing and your channeling and that creative outlet. And so I want you to just try to write like a paragraph a day about your experience and how you're coming into joy. And I remember when she first gave me the idea, and I was just like, oh God, I'm too depressed. Like, I'm too off. But it actually did. And I remember as a teenager when I was having a depressive episode, and she would do the same thing. She would get me to journal and write. And at first it would be like, oh, this is shit. And then it would start like flowing, and I would notice a change. It was almost like spirit was coming through me and going, oh good, we can actually get through that blockage now.
And plus, because you weren't connecting, you had to release it some way. It's
like a way for me to connect. Similar to singing for me. But writing is huge. So channeled that over that period, and then I went up to mum's a couple of months after I'd gotten out, and we finished writing it and did the whole like audio. I did the audio book part of it, which was cool. It was a cool experience.
Awesome! How exciting! What that you can get that on Amazon? Is that on Amazon?
Yeah. On Amazon and Audible.
It's so cool. So you wrote about your experience, or that's so huge.
I wrote a lot of, there's a couple of like chapters in there where it kind of goes into how I was feeling at the time, and the depressive thoughts and how I didn't want to get out of bed and that kind of thing. But it's packed full of like practical examples for how to find your joy when you're not in that space. And how do you can't just be Pollyanna and do like an affirmation and then all of a sudden it's all fixed. It's like there are actual more like nitty-gritty tips.
What would be your biggest tips to actually move through, like if you had someone that was in the deep of just having their head is, with the mental, especially with what's going on right now, I mean, they've got no one to talk to, they're just in they're in their head and they've got so much emotions coming through, and they're in that state of really thinking, oh good God, is this all there is for me? What would be some tips that you would give them to actually move them through that space, or to help them in some sort of way?
Circles. I know it can be really difficult when you're in that space and you feel really vulnerable and you don't necessarily feel the call to share, but going to things like cacao ceremonies, women's circles or men's circles, or co-creative spaces. That was a saving grace for me, to be able to go somewhere and share and be held. And those kinds of places are just so empathetic and compassionate, and
you realize you're normal because there's so many people
packed full of like juicy, like usually angelic energy. A huge one for me was music. And I'm not religious in the sense of being like indoctrinated religious, but worship music and like connecting with like the angelic realm has always been a really, really massive one for me, like feeling kind of God-like energy channeling through the music.
Yeah.
but everyone's got their different flair. So it might be more like shaking it up to some more like
Dancing,
shamanic style,
giving
like
that energy,
drum
I
type
love
stuff.
that. Yeah.
Getting to like an ecstatic dance,
Yes. It's
ceremony.
amazing with moving the body how much energy and how much of the yuck that we can actually release, because when we're not moving and we're sitting around and for me, I was wallowing in it, getting up and even just shaking my hands and jumping up and down was just, and raising that vibration that way.
Yeah. Huge. The other one is breath work.
Yes.
Going to having a breath work facilitation where you can actually get that chi flowing through the body and releasing, because I think what I've learnt the most is that I've been like out of touch with my body for so long in my life, and so many of us are, where we've got all this stuff going here, but it just needs to kind of like a fountain be circulated through, but we don't have practical tools to do that.
And that's why our chakras get blocked, because we're not moving that energy force. Is it Kong Chi? Is it Kong Chi?
Qigong.
Love that. That's a real good one. I did that for a while, and I go back to that whenever I'm feeling like I really need to ground and I really need to get my chakras and the energy actually moving. Have you done that? I love it.
No, I haven't.
Oh, I love it. It's really good. And there's a YouTube channel, as a YouTube that you just about 30 minutes, and it's great. You shake your body and you center yourself, and you can feel the energy actually going into your body and circulating and flowing. And you feel so energized afterwards. Because yoga, I love yoga, but sometimes I just want something different. And it's awesome.
Yeah, I'll have to try that.
Yeah. So is there anything that you would like to leave or give, any sort of like advice that you'd like to give the listeners?
Ooh, what's my channeled piece of advice? I guess my channeled piece of advice, and it kind of surprises me that this is what I'm choosing, but this is what's channeling through, is whatever your journey is, whether it's a journey like particularly with spirit or it's more of a grounded journey, to find a way to like shut down the world in the sense of coming into your own inner autonomy. So having those moments in your day or your week or your month where you put your phone on flight mode, it's all very well and good to get like advice from other people and get their counsel, but we have such a noisy lifestyle these days that we don't have a lot of time where we actually just listen to our higher self and tune into our own internal compass. Yeah. And that's a big part of my journey at the moment, is actually learning to have that stillness and that quiet and go, what does she have to say, like my higher self? Yeah. So making time for that is probably my big bit of advice.
I love that. And it's funny because I just did yesterday a podcast all about that, about stopping, grounding in and being in the stillness, because we do, there's so much, we become these big seekers. We're seeking for what we need, when really it's all in here. I know it's cliche, but it's all friggin' in here. It's amazing. Yeah. Oh, good. Love it. Is there anything else you want to share before we? Anything else? I know you're a channel. I probably don't even need to ask you questions.
Just like my middle name, like I know it might sound a little bit Pollyanna, but just trying to focus on what we can do to bring more joy and essence of that energy into our lives at the moment. Yeah, there's so much focus on negativity and fear. Just, what can you do on a daily basis to spark joy?
I love that. It's a great way to end the podcast. I love it. Joy. We're either in pleasure or in pain, so let's go for fucking pleasure, I say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Become a pleasure seeker.
Yeah.
Or joy seeker.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on, gorgeous, and sharing, your experience and your wisdom, and, talking about the woo-woo, as you call it, where for me, it's just my normal everyday life, like you, and sharing that part of you. I really appreciate, and teaching them how to connect and the dream space. And honestly, if you want to analyze or understand your dreams, this is the woman. She's friggin' phenomenal. So, thank you so much for coming on, gorgeous. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your story.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that was another episode of The Art of Quantum Healing. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. Make sure to check out all the show notes of today's episode on my website by clicking on the link in the description. Also, make sure to join my newsletter to receive a free guided meditation to help you feel grounded throughout your day. Finally, make sure to subscribe to my channel and help us grow the community by sharing it with your friends. I am your host, Lisa Nadler, and this is the Art of Quantum Healing.